What goes down when one of Hollywood's most favorite actresses goes head-to-head with a talk show host who believes he's in control? What you're about to hear is the kind of moment that makes live TV history. This is the tale of how Diane Keaton, the Academy Award-winning legend, stood up for herself against Jimmy Kimmel and left everyone in the studio speechless. This wasn't just another cringeworthy celebrity interview. It was a life lesson in elegance, facing arrogance, and by the end of this, you'll understand why Diane walked off that stage with her head held high. Now, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, because trust me, this one gets heated. The second Diane Keaton arrived on the stage of Jimmy Kimmel Live, you sense the room change. She came in to help publicize her new movie, a considered drama that examined growing old in Hollywood. Something she can tell you a great deal about, having spent many years in the public eye. The crowd welcomed her, genuinely applauding as she took her seat in the guest chair, with that signature grin that has illuminated the screen for decades. But Jimmy appeared to have a different type of energy working, so Diane Jimmy said, reclining in his chair with a half smile that wasn't really friendly. I have to ask about this new film of yours. Another movie about aging in Hollywood? Are we out of ideas for you to discuss? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was an uncomfortably piercing way to begin, particularly with someone as esteemed as Diane Keaton. Her smile drooped a little, but she remained calm. Well, Jimmy, I believe women of this age get a lot of great stories told about them. We don't really hear enough truthful accounts of what it is to grow old as a woman, particularly in this field or anywhere else within society. Jimmy waved her off with a swiftness of his hand. Sure, sure, but wouldn't audiences like something a little more, I don't know, energetic? I mean, how many can we see Diane Keaton play the same role? The room went totally silent. His words weren't playful. They sounded like a challenge, and you could sense the tension grow. Diane sat straighter, and in an instant, the warm, welcoming presence she's so famous for began to cool off. I'm sorry, the same character? She inquired, her tone suddenly becoming harsher. Jimmy, I've done everything from Annie Hall to a mob wife in The Godfather. I've done comedy, drama, romance, and thrillers. What do you mean by the same character exactly? Jimmy appeared to know he'd ruffled the wrong feathers, but rather than backing down, he leaned in harder. Come on, Diane, you know what I mean? The offbeat, neurotic lady just trying to get some things right? It's sort of your thing at this point. The crowd remained silent, no laugh, no clap, not even a nod. Even the band sitting behind Jimmy's desk looked as if they wanted to be somewhere else. This was not your typical lighthearted late-night interview. This felt intimate, and really it felt cruel. Diane took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steady but unflinching. Jimmy, I think you're confusing me with actresses from early in my career. But even then, reducing any role to a stereotype indicates that you actually don't get acting at all. Oh, great, here we go, Jimmy added with a dramatic eye roll. Obviously playing it up for the cameras. Are we learning how to act now? Because let me tell you, Diane, our viewers aren't in for acting. 101. It was a low blow intended to make her appear out of touch simply for having stood up for her work. But Diane Keaton is not one who gets flustered easily. She inched forward just slightly and glared Jimmy directly in the eye. You know what, Jimmy, you're right. Your audience doesn't tune in for acting classes. They come here hoping to see their favorite stars treated with respect and maybe learn something about them. But it seems like you're more into cheap shots than having a real conversation. You could sense the air shift in the studio. The tension was palpable. Jimmy's crew backstage were likely fighting to come up with something to salvage the interview. But Jimmy wasn't giving up cheap shots. He laughed, though it didn't quite ring true. Diane, I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. I mean, be honest, when did you last do anything that actually surprised anyone? When did you last take a genuine risk, and there in an instant, you saw it? The instant Diane had had enough. Her face set hard and her voice returned steady and firm, a genuine risk. She spoke slowly. Jimmy, I have been taking risks my entire career. I took a risk aging normally in an industry that demands women remain youthful perpetually. I took a risk each time I opted for difficult roles as opposed to simple ones. I took a risk by remaining at work past the age. Hollywood tends to discard women, Jimmy prepared to interrupt. But Diane raised her hand and the room went still. There was something about her being there that insisted on silence. But you know what, the greatest risk I ever took was appearing on shows like this. thinking that the host would speak to me like a human being and would not reduce me to a joke. The studio fell so silent, you could actually hear the hum of the cameras. Jimmy no longer looked smug. He appeared uneasy, but he still attempted to push back. "Look, Diane," he said in a voice that sent everyone cringing. "I think you're being overly sensitive. This is comedy. This is what we do. We joke, we laugh. Perhaps you have forgotten how to not be so serious." And suddenly the entire room chilled. The audacity of that line made everyone speechless. Here was Jimmy Kimmel informing Diane Keaton, a woman whose life had been based in comedy, an actress who had worked with legends Woody Allen and Nancy Meyers, that she didn't get humor. Diane's response was as icy sensitive. "Jimmy, there is a distinction between humor and brutality. There is a distinction between teasing and being just plain rude. And there is a big difference between a joke and whatever it is you've been doing for the past 5 minutes." Jimmy fidgeted in his chair. You could tell he realized things weren't going according to plan, but his ego wouldn't permit him to retreat. "Oh, please. You're really saying you can't handle a little ribbing? This is Hollywood, Diane. This is the business. If I can't take the heat—" Diane interrupted. Now her tone was blazing. "Jimmy, I've been taking heat in this business since before you even knew what a camera was. I've had directors screaming in my face, producers attempting to intimidate me, and critics destroying me. But you know what? I've never had to contend with a host who invited me on their program only to knock me down for amusement." The bandleader glanced away. The audience was absolutely motionless. Even Jimmy's regular sidekick appeared to disappear from the moment this wasn't a loose interview anymore. This was a confrontation, and it was obvious who was in charge. Jimmy attempted to change gears, wringing out a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Diane, look, perhaps we started off on the wrong foot. Why don't we just begin anew? Tell us about the new movie." But Diane wasn't having it. "No, Jimmy, we're not beginning again because this right here is the issue. You think you can say whatever you want to, whoever you want to hurt people for the sake of a joke, and then just press reset when it's no longer funny. That's not how respect works. Respect now." Jimmy's cool demeanor was slipping quickly. "Diane, with all due respect, you were on my show. This is my home. These are my rules. If you don't like the way I do things, perhaps late-night TV isn't for you anymore." And just like that, the mood in the room imploded. It was as if Jimmy had stepped across a line he didn't even realize existed, implying Diane Keaton. The woman who had been entertaining audiences since the 70s did not have a place on contemporary TV. The chutzpah of this notion took everybody's breath away. Diane leaned back in her chair and simply gazed at Jimmy, not with anger, not even with disappointment. Perhaps it was with pity, and when she spoke, her voice was low but firm, each word infused with years of hard-earned experience. "Jimmy, do you have any idea how many talk show hosts I've sat across from during my career? Do you have any idea how many interviews I've conducted? Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, Ellen DeGeneres. Each and every one of them knew their task was to elevate their guests to create a true moment with the audience, to honor both the work and the person in this chair." Jimmy attempted to interject, but Diane continued on her mission, her voice firming up. "But you, Jimmy, you appear to believe that your role is to demonstrate that you are clever by making your guests feel diminutive. You believe entertainment involves making people feel uncomfortable, making people justify themselves, making people retreat just so that you can be bigger." "Now hold on just a minute," Jimmy snapped, his voice rising. "I don't have to sit here and get lectured on how to do my job. I've done this for years. I have 1 million viewers. I think I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" Diane has asked, her tone even, but pointed, because as of now, you've got one of Hollywood's most honored actresses in that seat. And rather than shining a light on her work, rather than having a thoughtful dialogue, rather than providing your viewers something genuine, you've spent the whole segment attempting to tear her apart. Is that your concept of good television?" Jimmy's face was reddening, his carefully crafted on-air persona was sliding quickly. "You know what, Diane, perhaps the issue isn't me. Perhaps the issue is that you've been in this line of work so long, you feel that people owe you something. Perhaps you feel that your reputation makes you above being called out criticism." Diane let out a skeptical laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Jimmy, you haven't made one piece of valid criticism. You've been throwing around general insults about my career without demonstrating any real familiarity with my work. You've suggested that I'm pigeonholed into one role without providing a single example. You've discounted decades of acting without making a single meaningful comment. At all, that's not criticism, Jimmy. That's just being cruel. The audience in the studio was riveted to each and every word. This wasn't an interview gone wrong anymore. This was a moment of masterclass in not losing your cool while standing your ground. Diane Keaton was politely and steadily calling out Jimmy's antics while maintaining her composure. Jimmy was beginning to come apart on the other hand. Look, I don't know what you're after here, Diane. I'm just attempting to have a conversation. No, you're not, Diane replied, her voice unflinching. You're trying to win. You're trying to prove something. But this wasn't the kind of contest. This was supposed to be a conversation regarding my new film about my life, about relating with your audience. And instead you made it a power struggle that no one requested. Jimmy slammed his hand on the desk, perhaps to appear forceful, perhaps to take back control, but it read more like a tantrum. You know what? Fine if you don't wish to go along. If you can't be able to have fun with this, perhaps we should just cut it off now. Diane stared at him for a minute, and then she did the unlikeliest thing. She smiled, not warmly, not with kindness, but with the type of smile that arrives on the lips when one knows precisely what they are about to say is going to hit hard. Jimmy, she replied, standing up. I've had this same discussion repeatedly for 40 years with directors who believed they could order me around, with producers who believed they knew more about me, with critics who believed they could define me. And you know what I've learned from all that? She gazed at him, actually gazed at him, as if attempting to glimpse the Jimmy Kimmel, who a while back may have had respect for the individual sitting across from him, the one who hadn't yet become so used to covering up behind a smile and a joke. Jimmy, she said softly, you had a choice. You could have used the platform you had tonight to create something worthwhile, to offer your audience a glimpse at something authentic. Instead, you went for the cheap joke. And that's not only disappointing, it's sad. The language stung harder than any tantrum possibly could. She did not scream. She did not swear. She did not rage out. She just stood there with decades of class, fortitude, and authority earned over a lifetime shining from her. The crowd, once present for a few laughs and a late-night chat, was experiencing something raw and unforgettable. Ego dismantling with the precision only Diane Keaton could give. Jimmy's mouth opened, but nothing emerged. For the first time in perhaps his whole career, he really did seem speechless. He looked to the side of the stage, hopefully expecting a producer or a cue card to bail him out, but none appeared. Diane faced the crowd, giving a tiny nod of appreciation. And then to Jimmy, she said one last thing. Being in this chair isn't a privilege you're owed, Jimmy. It's a responsibility you've clearly forgotten. And with that, she walked off the stage. No fanfare, no applause track, no dramatic lighting cue. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows truth. The kind of silence that lingers long after the cameras stop rolling. Behind her, Jimmy stiffed in his chair, looking at the vacant guest seat as if it had just consumed the last morsel of his power. Because perhaps it had. What went on the air that evening will go down in late-night legend. Not as a humorous bit or a viral laugh, but as a reckoning moment in culture. A reminder that humor without insight is mere din. And sometimes silence says everything it needs to. The crowd sat in stunned silence, eyes tracking the dignified departure of Diane Keaton. No dramatic music, no outro signal from the band, no witty punchline to diffuse the tension. Just a void, the sort that comes after truth slices through pretense. Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen, visibly shaken, as the gravity of the moment set in around him like mist. This was not merely a tough guest. This was not a segment that went off the rails. This was a reckoning, a live, raw moment where someone just spoke the truth that so many had silently felt about late-night TV's fall into ridicule, passed off as humor. Backstage, production assistants rushed to determine what to delete, what to spin, how to reframe this for damage control, but they all knew this could not be edited out. The internet would ensure that. Within a few hours, video of the exchange would circulate like wildfire. Headlines would flash. Diane Keaton walks out on Jimmy Kimmel after on-air disrespect. Hollywood legend puts Kimmel in his place, a masterclass in grace under fire. Not just an interview, a turning point in late-night television. And they weren't wrong. Social media exploded with admiration for Diane's calm, her fortitude, her refusal to let herself be made a punchline. Young actresses, veteran industry professionals, fans of every age, they came out in support of her. It wasn't only about her, it was about what she represented. Dignity, respect, boundaries in a culture that too frequently muddled them for ratings. And what about Jimmy? He sat in his chair long after the cameras went off. No smiles, no jokes, only the soft hum of a studio that had seen something true, something too real to laugh off, something too honest to be dismissed. That evening, folks didn't merely discuss Diane Keaton's new film. They discussed her bravery. They discussed what it takes to stand up straight in the face of disrespect. And they discussed how, occasionally, the strongest thing you can possibly do is walk away. It was a moment that would be studied in media classes, referenced in think pieces, and remembered by anyone who'd ever been made to feel small, until someone brave enough reminded them they didn't have to be. And as the lights dimmed on the stage of Jimmy Kimmel Live, the legacy of that moment had only just begun. Jimmy remained seated at his desk, utterly speechless, possibly for the very first time in his whole career. The erstwhile lively crowd was petrified in dumbfounded silence, still trying to soak in the unforgettable scene they had just seen. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every oscillation of Jimmy's uncomfortable face, the tension in the room, and the eerie hush that had succeeded Diane Keaton's powerful departure. This was not another late-night gaffe. This wasn't a celebrity storming off in a rage. This was an hour of reckoning. What made Diane Keaton's exit so significant wasn't anger or theatrics. It was the sheer poise, the grace with which she deflated arrogance without once having to raise her voice. She didn't equal Jimmy's ego with outrage. She simply refused to shrink herself to accommodate someone else's insecurity. She didn't battle to be heard. She knew her value, and she walked away the winner. That's the actual tale of Diane Keaton walking away from Jimmy Kimmel Live. Not a meltdown, not a publicity stunt, but a lesson in dignity, boundaries, and the quiet strength of a person who no longer feels the need to prove themselves to anyone. So now we ask the question to you. Was Diane justified in walking away? Should she have remained and attempted to redirect the dialogue? And did her silence and exit speak louder than words could? Or do you think her silence and exit spoke volumes louder than words could? Let us hear what you have to say in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more memorable moments when Hollywood's biggest stars showed us what strength really looks like on and off screen.